Today I am speaking with Ben Sinclair. Ben is host of the podcast Unravelling the Universe. Unravelling the Universe is a podcast and YouTube channel dedicated to long-form video interviews with scientists, academics, researchers, and experiencers. The show explores phenomena related to three questions. What happens after we die? Are we alone in the universe or on Earth? What is the nature of reality? Ben's previous guests include Dr. Jim Tucker, Dr. Bruce Greyson, Leslie Kean, and Professor Avi Loeb. The main areas of discussion on his show include UFOs, UAP, which is unidentified aerial phenomena, death-related phenomena, such as NDEs, reincarnation, and mediumship, along with psychic phenomena and consciousness. Ben has done a lot of research into these extraordinary phenomena and tries to balance his curiosity and open mind with his natural skepticism. As you can tell, Ben and I have a lot of common interests, and I think you'll really enjoy our conversation. Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the title. Welcome to What the F Just Happened? I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listened to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I'll be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird stuff. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the F just happened? Hi everyone. Today I am talking with Ben Sinclair, host of Unravelling the Universe podcast. So, hi Ben, welcome.
Hey Liz, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming on. And if you like this podcast, you will love Unraveling the Universe. It is very similar topics. So you can tell us better than I can. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so it's called, as you said, Unraveling the Universe. And we focus on topics related to three questions. They could be loosely related or directly related to three questions. So that's what happens after we die. So that's the main stuff we have in common right there, of course. That's everything regarding, reincarnation, mediumship, after-death communications, near-death experiences, end-of-life experiences, shared death experiences, everything in this area. Are we alone in the universe? UFOs, UAP, kind of space, but we haven't really gone into. It's mostly UFOs, that question, and then the other one is what is the nature of reality. So that's things more like psychic phenomena, psi phenomena, and kind of a coverall bucket. So like if there's anything that I wanted to look into that's similar to these things but not fitting cleanly in what happens after we die, it's kind of it's all good. What's the meaning of reality? What's the nature of reality? Everything is covered. And so, I explore those topics and phenomena via interviews with scientists, academics, researchers, and experiencers. And I guess that's the main things you need to know. Really, it's available on YouTube as video. It's available Spotify and everywhere else as audio. I think that's the kind of highlights, the key information.
And he has amazing guests like Dr. Jim Tucker, who, as any of you listeners will know, I talk about quite a bit, and was the first person who changed my mind about the possibility of afterlife evidence.
Yeah,
and I
Jim's amazing.
Yeah, and that was such a good episode. And I want to ask you, because I went back and checked some of the first episodes, which are really, really good, but they're a completely different topic.
Yeah.
So I'm just so curious. First of all, I guess I'll ask you what prompted you to start the podcast in the first place, and then why the change in direction?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it was a pretty abrupt change, I guess, from the outside. So why did I start the podcast in the first place? Starting a podcast was something that had been, I guess, in the back of my mind for maybe as much as like a decade, give or take. I don't know. It was something since I was a teenager, maybe a young adult, like that was kind of always in and around my my thoughts, like, oh, that would be cool. I think originally it was like, oh, it'd be cool to start with my friends, just chatting shit, or talking about sports or something like that, like when my interests were totally different, like the podcast has been there before these interests arrived. Anyway, the COVID lockdown, everything, it felt like maybe the right moment to kind of actually give it a go finally and actually try and start something. At that point, my main interests were, I was interested in a lot of things. So I really wanted to keep it general. I wanted to do a general show and just talk to people that I felt had interesting stories to tell, or, maybe motivational, inspirational, just fascinating, anything that really grabbed me. So I was talking to some people that were like, disabled mountaineers or adventurers, or, some of them were blind. I spoke to a deaf musician, Mandy Harvey, a couple of astronauts in there. I spoke to some people about UFOs, so I was already interested in that kind of field, that topic, and so that started to creep in from early on. I spoke to a guy, Robert Wagner, about lucid dreaming, which at the time, because when we were Have You Met, again, it was different. It was general. It was about a bit of everything. I spoke to Robert, and I was thinking, okay, we're going to talk about lucid dreaming, which is, you can control your dreams and kind of you can make decisions actively when you become aware that you're dreaming. And it ended up taking kind of some different side roads as well, that conversation. Like Robert was telling me about, like accessing past life memories in dreams and things like healing in dreams and all this. I was like, whoa, come on. Like, this is not why I was not like ready for this. I was not expecting this. Just wanted to talk about dreams. And now he's talking about all this crazy stuff of reincarnation and, psychic stuff. And I can't really take this guy that, like, I'm trying to still take him seriously. And I'm trying to have this like, conversation from the skeptical point of view, but wow, that stuff was like really a bit much for me at the time. So I don't know if anybody watches that episode, maybe they'll pick up on me being a bit like, did not realize we were going to go down this road. And yes, a few other guests in that area. So I spoke to Tom Hart-Dyke, I just wanted to mention this one in particular because it was maybe one of my favorites. He was just this super charismatic, super nice guy from the UK who he was a botanist, and he's really researching plants. He would go around the world plant hunting, looking for rare types of orchid. So he went to this place called the Darien Gap, which is like a very dangerous bit of jungle in South America. And he was, looking for rare orchids. And he got kidnapped by these like guerrilla warrior, whatever, soldiers, and held captive for, I might get the time frame wrong, but I think it was give or take 9 months. And he just shared this whole story with me, like how he was held captive and what that was like. And it was just wild conversation, wild, like to learn all of this. And he's just such a cool, nice guy that it's just, is crazy. It's surreal. So yeah, that was fun. And anyway, did you ask me how did I then change to these other topics? Was that part of your question, or am I
Yeah.
jumping ahead?
No, that's it. Why the switch? And I just found that, first of all, so interesting because that's kind of like how a lot of us more logical people come to this. It's like you find something and you switch. So your podcast kind of followed that. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
so curious why the complete switch into afterlife evidence and, the three things you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah. So as you can kind of tell, it wasn't the plan. It was never like, oh, we're going to do this for like a year and then we're going to totally change and do that. It was, I guess it was a variety of things. So as I mentioned, I was already kind of doing some UFO episodes here and there as part of the Have You Met. That was like the plan. I wanted to kind of get some of those in there anyway, because I could talk to everyone and everyone. So I already wanted to get some of that in there. So that was, I guess, stage one. And I had considered at the beginning, I want to do a UFO podcast. My partner, Harmony, who helps me with all of this, who does this with me, was like, yeah, nah, I'm not really sure about that. Like, let's keep it general and stuff. And so we did. And I agreed, I guess, for the most part. And I guess a few months later, I think it was after we began, we found out that my granddad was having some tests and stuff we were worried he had cancer, basically. And I think a few months even before that news hit me about the going for tests, my partner had suggested, let's watch this new show on Netflix, Surviving Death. Looks cool. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know about that stuff, like mediumship and like, what's the rest of it? Come on, like, let's get real. I don't know if that's a good use of my time. Anyway, so this stuff, yeah, we started to get news that, yeah, granddad has this thing and he's going for tests. And anyway, I think around that time, it kind of harmonies again. Like, what about the surviving death that I suggested a few months ago? And I guess because of maybe death creeping into my mind a little bit and being a bit, scared of everything, I was like, yeah, all right, it felt right. Let's give it a go. Let's watch that. So we did. And it was awesome for the most part. Like, I was like, wow, like the reincarnation episodes with Jim and the kids was incredible, and the near-death experiences, I was like, wow, this is like, I've heard of near-death experiences, but I had no idea. Same with reincarnation. I've heard that some people think it's real, but never really looked into it beyond that. And the near-death experiences, like, wow, I didn't realize this went so far, so deep. And some of the episodes I was, on the fence. The mediumship ones, I was definitely not even on the fence. I was a bit like, yeah, I'm definitely finding this questionable.
They didn't do as evidential a job with the mediumship. I mean, they touched upon a few, like having Laura Lynn and Sandra
She was
O'Hara.
the one that I was like,
yeah.
That one, Laura Lynn, I could never quite close the book on Laura Lynn. I was like, even though I felt that the two episodes didn't convince me, and I still at this point was quite, uncertain about the whole thing. Yeah, Laura, I was like, there's something about her. Like, I think she could be real, she could be real. So anyway, yeah, I watched the series and that was my kind of thoughts after. Very intrigued and but still kind of not totally there yet. But I had this knowing. I remember having the sense of knowing that I would one day read Surviving Death, the book. I just knew I had to. I knew it was like something I would have to do. Didn't necessarily feel like that was the moment. And I think in that kind of in the gap there, we basically, my granddad did have cancer and everything kind of got worse, and we went to visit family for an extended period of time and dealing with all that kind of stuff. And then he passed. We came back to Leon, and this is like, I guess, 6 months or so after we watched the series. And then, yeah, a couple of months after coming back, I started to read the book, and that's where everything really started to change. Like, again, I went into it open-minded, curious, but still skeptical, still like, I don't know if this is, I don't know how this is going to go. I was definitely interested to learn more though. But what I distinctly remember is, yeah, flying through the first few chapters. I'm a notoriously slow reader, but this book, like, wow, I flew through this book. But it sounds, people have said the same about your book, I think, that they fly through your book because it's written, in a way that they get through really quickly. But I flew through it, and I remember getting to like the mediumship chapters with like Stuart Alexander and stuff, physical mediumship. And this, I remember the thought process. I remember sitting there thinking like, okay, this stuff I'm about to read is way past my boggle threshold. I'm totally like, this is something I've never considered in my life. And I was like, but this book, the way Leslie laid out Surviving Death, it's kind of like, like a ladder or like stairs. And so if I'd opened it on that chapter, I probably would have closed it again. But the fact I'd kind of gone through, near-death experiences, children with past life memories, end-of-life experiences, and it's all delivered so credibly, I start to become, okay. And I remember, the thought process was, I wonder if this is going to be able to convince me about physical mediumship. I wonder if this is going to at least how I'm going to feel after this. And I was like nervous, excited. Like, I can't wait to read this chapter to see if it can, grab me, if it can convince me. And anyway, to obviously that knowing is a different thing. Experiencing something for yourself is a different thing. But I was pretty compelled by the book. I was pretty convinced by all the accounts in there, especially because I think Leslie's somebody with a lot of, I take Leslie seriously. I think she's very, she's a serious person. I trust her, I guess is what I'm trying to say there. And then there was just one other quick book after that, which was The Conscious Universe by Dean Radin. And the reason I had to go straight to that was because Leslie laid it out as the only other real option here, if it's not survival, is super psi, aka unlimited psychic functioning, let's say. And I was like, again, when I read that at the start of the book, I'm like, come on, what am I reading here? Like, it's either survival or unlimited. Psychic's not even real. That was me when I started reading Surviving Death. So anyway, by the end, I was like, okay, I better read this book by Dean Radin, which seems to be like the Bible of psychic phenomena. And that's the only way I'm going to find out if this actually has some basis. And I'm like, same kind of similar experience again, where I'm like, no way, this is real. Why did nobody tell me this? How did I not know this? So in essence, that was my journey. And getting to the end of Dean's, by the time I got there, I was like, we have to change. I'm way too passionate about this stuff. Like, this is it. This is the fact that it's so incredible and that's so under discussed. It's so nobody talks about it. Nobody seems to know about it. I was upset that I didn't know about this stuff. So I was like, wow, we have to switch to that. And so we did.
Yeah, I'm
probably a really long answer.
No, I mean, there's no simple answer to this kind of thing. And I agree with you. As I started to study this, I'm just like, why? Why is this not? It was actually something that made me take a really long time to start to believe this, because that something was going on. Because I was like, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. Like, I couldn't believe, if this wasn't true, why Stephen Hawking was still living at the time I found it. And I also will back up. I have met Leslie Kean quite a few times, and I believe her as much as I believe people, I mean, she's of course, all of us, there's no way she's dishonest, but, all of us could maybe lie to ourselves. But of all the 8 billion people in the world, she's probably one of the ones who would least likely misinterpret or lie to herself. I consider her one of the most credible people I've ever met. So the Stuart Alexander is absolutely, I mean, read Leslie Kean's book. It's boggle threshold, but I've since listened to a lot of episodes on him. I've known other people who've know Leslie well, who've attended his seances, and I trust them too. Like my friend Mike Anthony, who's author of Love Dad, How My Dad Died and Told Me He Didn't, and he's been there. So it's to me, that is the thing I am trying to delve into next, is physical mediumship. But
you should read Stuart's book, by the way, on that note. An Extraordinary Journey. Oh, you have it?
Yeah. It's on my list to read. So I plan to read it among one of the next books.
Yeah, it's an awesome book. It gives a real nice history of physical mediumship along with his story and people's accounts that have sat with him and everything like that. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Oh, no. Yeah, so I was going to ask if you have any thoughts on how this isn't all over, like the New York Times, every news outlet in the world that's credible isn't just jumping on this. And scientists, at the time I found this, Stephen Hawking was still living. And I was like, if this was real, Stephen Hawking and, Brian Greene of string theory, this would be the main thing. They are stopping everything to study the second the results came in. So why do you think that isn't happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard question. And it's probably one that we could like speculate about answers for like 10 hours and they'd probably all be correct in a way. Like there's probably so much to it. But yeah, why do I think it's not more known? I guess one of the main reasons must be the fact that the kind of the scientific current worldview, the mainstream science, in essence, rejects it out of hand, right? And it's kind of like if you ask, any of your who's like some of the main science communicators now, like Neil deGrasse Tyson or something like that, or Brian Cox. I'm pretty sure if you ask either of these guys, like, what do you think happens after we die? They're going to look at you like you're stupid, and like they look at the interviewer like they're stupid and go, well, of course the brain, stops working. And so our experience ceases and that's it. And I think that's just so ingrained in society, and it's become, I guess, a stigma it's become really stigmatized, and it's a taboo to be able to say to people, I think there's something after death, or I'm interested in the evidence for after death. I don't know. I think there's a lot of people out there that even will refuse to look at the evidence. Like there was one paper by, I think it's Etzel Cardena, I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name, but it was about the case for psychic phenomena. I think it was published in the American Psychologist. And it was a really solid paper talking about, some of the main experiments that have been done for psychic to prove the existence of psychic phenomena. And there was this paper that was a response to that article written by some skeptics. And like, I'm all for, like a skeptical response. Let's see what you've got. Like, I'd love to hear, skeptics address a lot of this phenomena. But their response was, and literally, like, I could find the article and send it to you. They said, like, we didn't look at the results for, of these experiments because we don't have to, because we're using, like, our argument is the old argument that pigs can't fly. So it doesn't, it just doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what your results show because it can't exist. It cannot exist. And that to me is the most infuriating like thought process in the world. Like, surely it should be okay. So as far as I'm aware, it can't exist, but the results say it exists. So we have some kind of conundrum here that which we need to figure out. Like that's something. But to say, we don't look because even if it says it's real, it's not accurate. That to me is wild. And I had like an exchange with somebody on Reddit the other day where I think there was a post saying, can somebody comment and make me feel better about death, because I'm really scared, I'm terrified of death and stuff. And they put some specific questions. I can't remember what they are now. It was stuff like, it was questions that were based on assumptions. So it was like, why do we go to, why does our experience end and never re-begin? Or why is it going to be darkness forever and nothingness forever? And instead of like, what will happen and will it be darkness forever? It was very much, already decided. So anyway, I gave like a real quick reply, like from the evidence that I've seen, the research that I've seen, actually, it's not going to be like this. And your question should be, is it going to be this? And anyway, somebody that wasn't the original poster started replying to me, and as if they're like really angrily telling me like, no, you're wrong. There's nothing after death. There's no evidence to say there is. Like everything, like really matter of fact, as if they are the most aware person in the world. I had a quick look at their profile, and some of their recent posts are unsurprisingly, I'm terrified of death. I'm terrified of oblivion. I'm terrified of nothingness. Can somebody make me feel better about the nothingness? So they didn't even want, they didn't even have the headspace to go, oh, this person's mentioning research. Maybe I should just spend 5 minutes Googling that and just see if there is anything. They couldn't even go that far. And I really struggle to get myself in their headspace. I don't know. It's like they're so afraid that maybe they feel if they do even look into it, then they're just doing that out of fear or out, for comfort. It's hard to get my head around. Anyway, to answer your question about why it's, what was it? Why is it not talked about? Why is it not known about? Yeah, it's all of that. It's that it goes against mainstream science. It goes against our current understanding of reality. Probably a lot of the aspects of the evidence go against some of the world's major religions. So there's probably lots of layers to it. But yeah, in essence, I would say it's the taboo that we've developed. Similar to UFOs, similar to that.
Yeah, I've noticed just everything you said. I back up too. Yeah. And I always notice it makes people very angry, which surprises me instead of curious. I'm like, my reply to those comments are always like, this is the biggest question. Isn't it okay to at least investigate? I just don't know why it makes people angry.
And I'm
then
fine to
religious
debate
people.
it, right? Sorry to interrupt you. I'm fine to debate it, but like debate me on the evidence, debate me on the research, on the results of the experiments. Don't debate me by just saying, no, you're wrong. There's no evidence. Like, that's just silly. Even like big time skeptics will admit that there's stuff there that could be considered evidence for survival. Whether they agree it is evidence for survival is another question, but process what's there and then let's talk about it, rather than just pretending there's nothing there when it's there for everybody to find and everybody to see. Yeah.
Yeah. I have noticed everything you just said. Yeah. It
Cool.
seems to
I'm
come
glad I'm
down
not
to
talking nonsense.
not in the least, not at all. And yeah, for me, it was a big kind of, I always idealize scientists and skeptics, and in many ways, they offer a lot. But I was very relieved when I started to delve into the skeptical counterpoints, and then I even reached out to some skeptics, and none that I encountered offered any substantial arguments
Nothing
to
that we haven't
the
thought about,
evidence.
right? Because we've already, me and you, I'm sure I speak for you. I'm sure I can do this in this. You've probably already had the thought of like, are these people lying? Have they made this up? Is this, bad experiment, no controlled in the experiments? And all the kind of obvious things. Yeah, we've already considered that. It's like in the UFO stuff, where instead of talking about the extraordinary things that are witnessed and have happened, they're like, oh yeah, most UFOs are explainable. We're like, yeah, okay, we know. Just okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so our listeners know, we're going to be talking some about the afterlife, but I will be delving in and asking Ben about UFOs. So if any of you are like, oh, I want to hear more, we will get to that. So
Cool.
yeah, there's some fascinating UFO stuff. But I actually first want to ask you, it sounds like you didn't believe anything like an afterlife before delving into this. What were your thoughts? Were you raised religious or atheist as a kid? Like, curious to
Mm-hmm.
know, like,
Yeah.
everything you thought leading up to, as they call like the flip or the switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So I was, born and raised in a Christian family. I think Protestant. So yeah, mum and dad religious. Nan, granddad very religious. Kind of everybody really in my family religious to an extent. And I was raised, to go to church on Sundays and things like that. It wasn't like a kind of, overbearing, I wouldn't say, upbringing. It wasn't like I was, forced to say grace at every meal and I had to do prayers at any time of day or anything like that. I was encouraged to say a little prayer before bed as a kid. And we were encouraged to say grace before a Sunday roast or whatever, but it was kind of, I guess, fairly religious without being, fanatically religious. So anyway, unsurprisingly, I grew up Christian. So I'd be in school, like people would say, oh, are you religious? But yeah, I'm Christian, even though I got to be honest, like I guess I didn't really feel like a Christian a lot of the time. It was, it was partly the comfort of like, I don't want to die and have nothing. I'm terrified of that. And all my family believe this. And that sounds pretty sweet. So like, I don't know. I'm going to believe that over nothing, especially when the whole point, if you start to question faith and stuff and religion, the easy answer that they would give me would be, well, you just got to have faith, Ben. At a certain point, you just got to believe, right? You got to take the leap of faith and be like, oh yeah, I can get on board with that. Like that's interesting. And so I had that kind of side of me. Whereas at the same time, if you'd said to me, what do you think about psychic phenomena at that time, any time in my childhood or teenage years or even young adult, I would have said no, just no. Like I think nothing of psi phenomena. I think it's the stuff you see. I've said this on my podcast a few times, but what do I picture when I hear psi phenomena? Before I got into this stuff, I would picture an old lady at a fairground with a crystal ball going like, or reading my palms, going like, oh yeah, I see you've got a big line here. That means, you're going to die in a couple, all that kind of, that's what I would picture. And I just think, what a load of nonsense. UFOs, I guess I was pretty skeptical of. I didn't have much of an opinion. I didn't look into it until 2017-ish, a bit earlier than that. But that came before the afterlife and stuff like that. Sorry, what was your question, Liz? I've managed to talk so much I forgot your question.
No, everything you're saying is really interesting. My question, you answered it. What had you thought of growing up about afterlife?
So it was religious and I thought heaven, we're going to go to heaven, but I always had this doubt. I never really fully was truly into it. Anyway, somewhere around early 20s, I guess, I started to kind of drifting more and more away from it, even though I had been for a long time already. I guess when I was a teenager, my parents, when I sort of got to that age, my parents were like, oh, if you don't want to come to church, you don't have to come to church. I'd be like, okay, I'm having a lie-in then, obviously. So that was kind of how it went. And then in my 20s, I started to really grapple with it, because on the one hand, I really felt this, I just don't really believe it in a sense. And then, but at the same time, I couldn't take it off. I couldn't take this big coat of religion off, because if I did, then I'm naked and I'm cold and I'm afraid, because then I have nothing. I have no comfort, I might die and have nothingness forever. And I'm not ready for that. And I'm not ready to deal with that. But anyway, one day, I guess I just found the kind of, I would say the courage, or just something changed, a switch flicked. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm ready to finally admit to myself and admit to my family that, well, to myself initially, so I could kind of say, okay, draw a line in the sand. I guess I'm not religious anymore. And then eventually my family would ask me, and the hardest one to tell was definitely Nan. She was like, what? But yeah, that kind of, the hardest bit then for me was after finally drawing that line in the sand and kind of not feeling like I'm not a Christian anymore. The hardest time was before finding this research, where it was like a few years of just, how would I approach death? Don't think about it. Just don't think about it. Just put it out of my mind. Just focus on, stuff that's happening in your life, because death probably is going to be nothing. And I don't want to think about that. And it's horrible and it's terrifying. Psi phenomena still didn't enter my world, and UFOs became interesting in 2017. But yeah, death wise, I went from religious to nothing, and the nothing scared me, but scared me in the sense, I didn't go seeking comfort. I didn't go seeking another religion or research or anything like that, because I didn't know it was there. I just took the kind of, block everything, way of thinking.
Very similar in terms of the blocking. And although I never believed in God, that's probably the only difference. Now I have a question. If you kind of had a turning point, I don't know if you'll relate to this, but you mentioned finding Leslie Kean and Dr. Dean Radin. Mm-hmm. And for me, and I know Leslie Kean's had the similar thing. Like, you start to read the evidence and hear the evidence, and you're like, maybe, and it starts to slowly change. And then for me, there was kind of one big thing. I mean, it was a lot of things, the constant, as I call them, what the fucks, that just kept building up and getting stronger. And then there was this experience I had. It's in my book. I'm not going to waste time on my podcast going into it, but where I ended up having one time where I gave a medium reading, and all these sensations that I had been dismissing from mediums, I suddenly was able to see everything differently. It was kind of a big turning point for me, where I went to the next level. Mm-hmm. And I was able to absorb the evidence in another level. Did you have kind of a turning point where you went from maybe to, oh my God, there really is something going on?
Good question. Interesting. That, by the way, I'm going to have to ask you more about that whenever I get you onto my podcast to talk, because that sounds fascinating, that you had your own kind of experience of being a medium. That's wild.
It was crazy. It's not consistent. It's not something I can normally do, but it changed kind of everything in terms of how I believed mediums experiences a lot more.
I look forward to talking about that in the future, because that's crazy. But no, for me, unfortunately and strangely, because I know with a lot of people there is, I guess I haven't really quite had that moment yet where like it just becomes that, concrete knowing. For me, it was the Leslie stuff.
Oh, it's not a concrete knowing. I still question, but it's like I went to the next level where I think it went from possible to highly probable, and now it's even higher probable, but I still have it in the probability, not knowing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've reached a kind of stage that's definitely higher now than where I was back then, but I think it's mostly due to just the sheer number of stuff I've been reading, like going through various books and various papers and talking of course to all these experts, listening to podcasts, watching talks on YouTube, like all of this area. So it would just be kind of building on top, like, and in the early stages, like, I guess I'd still be very like unsure, even though those two books did literally change my worldview. I'd still kind of be quite unsure, but obviously the more then I build on it. But no, unfortunately I haven't had that experience that I'm like, wow, that was my one, like my amazing experience. About, I've had a few kind of maybe, like that might have been something. I think that was something, and that was really interesting. And whether that was an experience or not, like that was cool. And, but never that one where I'm like, wow, yeah, that was just without a doubt, like I communicated with that person or I reached that certain level of consciousness or whatever. No. So it's just been the gradual building and building of the research, really, for the most part. And I guess hearing the very compelling experiences from people that I'm like, I trust this person. Like either this person is insane and either they're insane, they're barefaced lying to me, or reality I perceived it to be for most of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I relate to everything you
Yeah.
just said there about, yeah. And I just don't think that many people who seem so credible, the amount of people who would have to be insane and lying.
Yeah.
And I mean, they would have to be, I would think at this point, lying, not insane, because I've seen them do it. I've seen this stuff happen. And so then they'd have to be, I mean, just the level of complexity to be able to succeed at that level of making it seem like something would happen. I don't want to say it's impossible, because I don't think anything's impossible. I mean, we could be living in a simulation for all I know, but I think it's like the least likely explanation of all the possibilities, you know. So
if if it was all mediumship, if all of our evidence was mediumship, for example, I'd probably be a lot more skeptical, right? We'd be like, if it's all physical mediumship and all, I'd be like, wow, they could have come up with some techniques and they could have found some really complicated way of, I don't know, like Darren Brown. I would like to talk to Darren Brown and find out how he does some of his stuff, because he claims to be an illusionist. I wonder whether maybe he has some psychic abilities that he doesn't realize he has. I do think that sometimes, but I would love to find out more about that. But it's the fact that it's just the wide body, right? You've got the children with the past life memories, you got the mediumship. They're all so different, near-death experiences. Everything is so different that, it becomes so compelling. And the results of the psi experiments are really, for me, that's the concrete bit. Like for me, that's the bit survival, we can all kind of debate it, speculate about it. We can all have a different, take. But for me, the psychic phenomena stuff, as crazy as it is that I feel with these words coming out of my mouth, it still feels surreal to say this, but it's essentially proven. I've said that to a few guests now, and they've agreed with me that, yeah, you're right. Like for anything, if it was anything else in science that we were trying to prove, the evidence that we have got already up to this point is more than enough, like to prove something, to have a change of worldview, a change of paradigm. And yet somehow it just doesn't do it in the eyes of most people.
regarding Darren Brown, I'll just say this really quickly. I went with another researcher, Mike Anthony, who I mentioned before, to Darren Brown's show.
Cool.
And our hearts were in our throat. We were like, if he does as good a job as our mediums, we're going to have to rethink our assessment. He is one of the best stage magicians I have ever seen. It was a brilliant show. I loved every minute of it. He did not do what the mediums do.
Yeah.
It was clearly stage magic in comparison. So
yeah,
that was
he must do some stuff, right? Do you agree that I think he does some stuff that taps into like his consciousness in certain ways? Either that or it's kind of set up for the TV, because I've seen him do things, where like you walk on red hot embers and walk on, shards of glass and everything like that. And I think sometimes like cutting himself, doing various things to your own body, and there must be at least an element of mind-body relationship control going on there. I don't know. I think Darren's an interesting one. I don't know how much, as I said, I haven't been live, so I don't know how much is played up for the cameras, but he seems, at least, like you say, one of the most talented illusionists ever, really, if not more. If not, like I say, maybe some psychic abilities that he doesn't realize he's tapping into. Yeah.
Everything I've seen, I would only conclude he's one of the world's best illusionists. I haven't, but I'm not ruling out what you said, but I haven't seen that. And Lloyd Arbach, who as well, and everyone on this podcast heard about him, he, as a mentalist, said himself and every mentalist he knows once in a while will get psychic information. So probably that has happened if it happens to all mentalists, and Darren Brown probably attributes it to coincidence and puts it to the side. But I haven't seen anything that would make me think anything's more than one of the best illusionists out there. But I just want to ask you, what do you think about afterlife? Like super psi or afterlife? What do you think?
I
Or
think,
something physics hasn't explained yet?
I mean, it is that in a sense. It's kind of all three. I think, like super psi. I think, yeah, like the basis for super psi is that we don't know how strong psi phenomena can be, right? That there is, in essence, no limit from our current understanding, our current point of view. And I can't disagree with that, because how can we put a limit on something that we haven't? We've done such basic testing of it in the lab in that sense. Like, we have no idea what the potential is. So yeah, super psi. I think psi seems potentially unlimited. Let's find out. Let's do more tests. But I don't think that rules out survival. Personally, I think a lot of the evidence for survival that goes above super psi is very compelling. So things like, and it's not to say that you couldn't make a case for it with super psi, because you probably, if super psi being what it is, unlimited psychic functioning, you could almost make a case for anything to fit into that, right? Because that's like the stuff from superhero films and comic books. But birthmarks and birth defects with children that have past life memories, when they have strong memories, strong statements, strong play behaviors, everything like that, and on top of that have these compelling birthmarks. So like, that they'll find out, oh, this person seems to match the statements they're making, and oh, look, they died because of a gunshot wound here, and oh, my kid has a big, a little birthmark here and a bigger one here, where the exit wound would be, and those kind of things. I find them very compelling, and I don't know how super psi really would explain that. There's lots of other areas too, I guess. Like veridical OBEs are pretty compelling, but in terms of, again, for the super psi, I guess I'd go more back to the reincarnation stuff, and I'd talk about how the children feel so attached, so emotionally attached to this previous person. It's not like this information is just coming through anomalously, and they're like, oh yeah, like Ben Sinclair, whatever, it, they're so attached. They're like, oh, take me back to my mom. Where's my other mom? I want to go. Where's my dad? I want to go to my other home. Where's my other home? Like, you're not my mom. You're not my dad. That's pretty wild for just like, if they're getting this information randomly downloaded, or if it's just like a glitch in the matrix. Surely it shouldn't come through with such a level of connection, and I was that person. That was me. Look in the picture, it's me. Like, they're pointing as me, and they have that real identification, I guess is the right word. I think that really strongly goes against super psi. I probably had some other things in mind that go against the super psi hypothesis, but off the top of my head, yeah, I'm not off the top of my head. I'm not getting any more jumping into my mouth. But I think it's a really interesting thing. That's something I like thinking about, that the super psi versus survival, because, as I said earlier, I think it's really the only way that survival isn't the thing, right? If we don't survive, then it must be because there is this super psi. Because you can't, as far as I'm concerned, there's no way you can explain the body of evidence that goes in favor of survival by merely normal explanations, as Jim, I think, calls them in his book. You can't get there with normal explanations. You just can't. You're just grasping at straws. So it's super psi and or survival. Yeah, I think we survive. I think that's the most likely hypothesis.
I agree with you. And I also like that you said the combination a bit of all three. I never thought of it that way. And I think that's going to be the answer I have now too. I think you're right, because I always sort of did it either or. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
And
and I think we will learn more about this stuff, right? The further we advance, and the more this is accepted. Of course, that's the biggest barrier to us learning more. But I reckon in 50 years, we'll have more of an idea. We might never have all the answers until it's our own time to transition. But yeah, I think we'll get a more scientific basis for this as time passes.
I think so too. I think if I could guess, it ties into quantum entanglement in some way, the mechanism that two particles that are light years
Mm.
apart can communicate instantly through some mechanism we don't understand. I have a feeling it's going to turn out to be the same
Hmm.
or at least
Yeah.
within the same family of mechanism, if I could
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Do
I
you have
think
any
that
thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think that seems, yeah, like from my rudimentary understanding of all of this kind of thing. Yeah, I think it's probably, when it's all said and done, we're going to come back to some kind of quantum related explanation. It might be different to our current understanding of quantum mechanics and all that kind of thing, but I think it's going to be something on that level. I know it's Stuart Hameroff, who did this theory with I think with Penrose. Anyway, he kind of thinks that the microtubules have play a big part in this, and I think that sounds, I've read into that. I don't have much to say about it right now. I'm not really at the same level of intellect as these guys, but very interesting nonetheless. And I think that could be, I haven't heard many people come up with something that sounds like it could hold water, and it was a pretty good theory that they put forward. And I think it also at least according to Stuart Hameroff, allows for psychic stuff and things like that. So maybe it's going to be related to the quantum stuff, related to the microtubules. But ultimately, I think, yeah, like the receiver thing, right? It's like our brain is like a receiver, like a computer, and there's the Wi-Fi signal, which is kind of our consciousness, and that's kind of coming into our brain. So then if we have a brain injury, if we get knocked out or get given anesthesia, it doesn't mean the Wi-Fi is turned off. I know you've probably had this described in loads of ways by, the same kind of thing, but yeah, so the signal is still coming. It's still, the signal is not broken. It's just the receiver. And once we kind of get back to health, that is able to be accessed again. Sometimes maybe people have memories of that time, say in a near-death experience, they come back, they have these memories. Maybe sometimes we don't bring the memories with us. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree in a lot of what you said, as well as in certain ways I just can't understand it yet. But
of course not. I mean, the brightest minds in the world.
I don't know how to,
yeah, like we could get the 20 brightest minds in the world, like quantum physicists, quantum mechanics, and philosophers and physicists and everything, and biologists, and they're all going to be pretty much stumped. Like they might come up with some good theories, but the answers are still, I think, a while away from us. Like the real answers, like the explanatory framework, rather than what happens.
Yeah. If we can even ever understand it any more than we can understand a color we've never seen
in this life.
This life. Yes.
I think it was in Ralph Blumenthal's book about John Mack. Do you know Dr. John Mack?
No, tell me.
He's a fascinating guy. He was a former Harvard psychiatrist, and he after he had a normal career for a while, high achieving, as I say, Harvard psychiatrist. And then he developed an interest in alien abductions, or the alien abduction phenomenon, should I say. And he got a lot of ridicule for that. There was a whole lot of, trouble with that. He had a lot of other side interests that he developed, like holotropic breathing, various breath works. Do we survive death? What happens after we die? All of this kind of thing. And in Ralph's book, anyway, I was only mentioning him for this tiny thing, that I think it's near the end of his book. John Mack passed away, and it's a biography of John Mack. And they have this little quote, and now John Mack knows everything, and I like that. It's like, not that we necessarily will know everything after we transition, but definitely got a better chance of kind of knowing everything on some kind of level than we do here, I think.
I agree. I think we'll know a lot of the questions we have here, and there are probably going to be other layers of questions we don't know yet. There's probably, I don't know, maybe multiple dimensions of consciousness that somehow tie into string theory, and we're in one of the dimensions. We probably go to higher where we know more, but yeah. I mean, who knows? I always kind of joke that after we die, seems to be strong evidence of reincarnation, but then, we'll be there and be like, but suddenly after 1,000,000 years, our consciousness seems to vanish from this realm. So that will be the next question, investigating in our, the word is afterlife, but that makes it sound like there's here and then there permanently. So I never love that word, so I guess the next dimension after this non-physical, there could be, the next layer of death, where are people going, or consciousness going after this dimension? I mean, who knows?
No, you're right. I think I heard you say to somebody in one of your interviews about, like, you asked them maybe if how long we will survive for after death is tied to something. And I haven't heard many people ask it, but I've asked the same question to some of my guests, because that's something I really wonder about. I think I asked Stuart Alexander, like, if any of his spirit team had given him any kind of inclination about this. And I wanted, like, is it tied to the sun? Is it tied to the galaxy? Is it tied to the universe? Is it tied to our planet? Is it like planet specific? Does every planet with life have this kind of system, and is that just nature? And maybe when the planet dies, that's it, kaput. Like, is it the sun? Is it something bigger? Or is it none of the above? Is it because it's non-physical? Is it just totally independent of everything? Like, big questions, huge questions.
I wonder that all the time. Does this consciousness last?
Yeah.
Through multiple big bangs, big crunches. Yeah, the planet, this universe, this solar system. What did Stuart Alexander have any insight into that? I mean,
he definitely didn't want to be any conclusive, but I think he basically said that the impression he'd got from his team was that it's not tied to anything like that it's not tied to the sun. And I think the once or twice I've asked it to people that are more sciencey, it's been like, yeah, if it's totally non-physical, then I don't see why it would need to be tied to something. So hopefully it's there's not like an expiry date, because this will all be great if we survive death, only to like die properly like 20 years after our death.
Right. Yeah. Or even 1 trillion years. I mean, that's a hell of a lot better than like the whatever amount, maximum, basically 100 that we get here if we're lucky. But still, then at the end of 1 trillion years, you're going to be pretty sad,
What's 1 trillion years in the afterlife, right? In the next life, like with how time works and like time being non-linear, like it could feel like a flash, right? Like, it's fascinating stuff.
Could. So fascinating. I want to ask you, and then I want to delve into UFOs. Have you ever had any personal experiences, like potentially gotten a sign from your grandfather, who I want to say I'm sorry for your loss. The loss is so hard. And gotten signs from him? Have you had a medium reading? Anything that would go into any form of personal experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of. Like I said earlier, I had some kind of maybes, where I was like, I feel like this definitely was the closest I've come, and I wasn't enough to make me feel this is 100%. First, about the loss, like this was the first time I actually had to deal with somebody, like that close to me passing. I previously lost my grandmother and grandfather on the other side, but we were never as close to them. Like this granddad was like, kind of like a second dad, and the same with my nan, who's still alive now. But yeah, I had a couple of dreams that I felt were really interesting. They weren't like, within a couple of days or anything of his passing or anything like that, but it was, I have the dates in my phone, but I think they were maybe like a year after or something like that, a few months at least. I won't go into like the whole thing in loads of detail, but kind of in a nutshell, I remember like I somehow got to this apartment, which wasn't an apartment that anybody that I knew or that I'd ever been to. And yet my family were there. It was kind of up a set of stairs, so you open the front door of this property and there's just stairs and it goes up. That's all. So it's like a maisonette, I think we call it in the UK. But anyway, so you go up and there's the apartment on one level. And anyway, my family were there. My granddad was ill in bed, like not in a good place. I knew he had cancer in the dream. I knew he was dying in the dream. And I knew I was there to kind of visit. And so I kind of sat by his bed for a bit and like, tried to talk. I think he was asleep the whole time maybe. But I was just there, like chatting to some of my other family. And then I got up to leave for some reason. So I got to go now. And I was like, I remember thinking, I don't want to wake him because, he needs his sleep and everything like that. And I'm walking down the stairs and I get near the bottom of the stairs and I hear like the door or something behind me, and I look back and my granddad's standing at the top of the stairs and he's like, oh, you're going to go without giving me a hug or whatever. And so I was like, oh no, you're awake. Like, of course I'm not. And so I run up the stairs and like, we have this hug. And I remember in the dream, like this kind of having this knowing of like, that we both knew that it was going to be like our last hug kind of thing. I remember feeling like I knew his thought, that he was thinking the same as me. And it was just, that was basically it. But it was just this kind of magic hug. And then like, yeah, I woke up and made notes. And so I still have the notes in my phone so that, if at least now I don't question, like, did I remember that right? Or am I kind of being generous to myself? No, I have it like written down. And I had another one with him, which was I'll tell this much briefer, and it was maybe stranger in a way. It was like I got to this place where he was there, and my great auntie Betty was there, who passed a few years before, and it was weird that, like, he was there and they were there together, and like it was like I was really happy to see them, they were happy to see me, and I remember something along the lines of one of them saying, "Oh, Granddad's going to pick you up tomorrow at 11 or something." And I remember waking up and thinking, like, did I just, like, am I going to die now tomorrow? Like, are they coming to pick me up in that sense? Like, is that, anyway, that didn't happen, thankfully. So I don't really know what that was all about. But, and
Keep
again,
the 11 maybe in many, many years down the line, because
maybe
times
I'd
are
have to double
different.
check
Maybe
the
11
number.
a.m., 11 p.m., maybe,
Yeah.
11 November 11th.
It's true. It's true. I'm going to read it
In
again after I get off the call to you and like
2090.
double check.
That's making a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it was interesting. I mean, like I said, I never allowed myself to be certain either way. I always stayed skeptical with it. Like, because you dream about family and you have dreams that are emotional and stuff. I actually told Julie Byshaw, somebody we both interviewed. I told her about that the other day. It's the first time I told anybody, really. And she was like, stop, just stop, like bullshitting yourself. Like, it happened. Like, it sounds like it was a communication. Like, accept it, like let it be part. And it's still hard for me to do that, but like I'm trying. I guess a couple of other things I can quickly
Well, I think
mention.
it probably took, I'll just say quickly about Dr. Julie Weishel, it probably took her years to get to the point where she'd say that. My guess is Dr. Weishel, like 20, I forget how long she's done this, 20 something, 30 something years. Probably, I think 20 something. Like, I think, or her first like 5 years of this, she probably would not have been, so that's what's happening, definitely. So the evidence, I just am saying that as it compounds, it gets stronger and stronger the more you do this.
Yeah,
so.
for sure.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So, major exciting news. Book number 1, WTF Just Happened. A Sciencey Skeptic Investigates Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife, is now available in audiobook. You can get it through my website or on Apple Books and on Audible. I read it myself, which was a really intense learning experience as well as emotional, as I relived a lot of memories. But for those of you who want to hear even more of my voice for some reason, or also are like me and prefer audiobooks, you can now listen to it. And what's also fun is some of the people read themselves. So you can go to my website, WTFJustHappened.net, where I link to Audible and Apple Books, or you can go directly to Amazon to get it on Audible or Apple Books to get it there. And I hope you enjoy it. And as always, let me know any.
Yeah, another couple of quick things that I'll just mention was, I guess I had some kind of weird synchronicities, like more recently. My partner as well was kind of, this was her, it was kind of both of us. So one of them that I'll tell you, the only one that I can remember clearly right now, is we recently rented a piece of land, like to give our dog somewhere to just run around and somewhere for us to just go and, like have a barbecue or picnic and just chill out with, it's nothing big. It's just a nice little slice of countryside, very small. And anyway, we were there. We'd only just rented it, and it was a bit of a mess. So I'm kind of going around, and there's these massive thistles, like really aggressive looking thistles. And I feel even bad to say this. I was a bit mean. I was kind of chopping them out, like taking the roots out, because like they're big and aggressive looking, and they can hurt my little dogs, like my big dog. So anyway, I'm taking out these thistles, and my partner Harmony, she gets a text saying, I think from her brother, literally at this moment, I've just started chopping these thistles. I've taken out like one or two, and I'm still going around this field with a shovel. And it's like a recipe for how to cook thistle that he sent her. And it was just like, what the hell is this? Like, just at the exact moment that I'm chopping thistle, it was too bizarre. So I felt like that was the universe trying to ask me either to make sure I cook the thistle or to stop cutting the thistle. I just stopped for the day. I was like, yeah, I'm good for now. I don't want to upset anybody. And the only other thing I'll mention wasn't me, it was my nan who has told me about some experiences. Again, very religious, very Christian, so doesn't believe in communication from the like from the deceased or anything like that, like direct communication, because that goes against the religion and X, Y, and Z. But she has recounted to me some things that happened with her that I'm convinced were amazing after death communications. You know, I won't go into too much detail, but just really stuff that are like way too much to be coincidence, like way too meaningful and perfect and things like that. Like, I guess, no, I can't really think of the example, and I should probably check with her before I, talk about it. But anyway, really compelling stuff that I'm like, wow, that like my dreams, I'm on the fence, but that stuff, man, like that's granddad. Like that's, yeah.
Ooh, that sounds pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Still
obviously
waiting
you
to sit with
trust.
mediums and stuff though. I haven't done that yet.
Ooh, you haven't had a medium reading yet. Oh, wow. Well, if you do, let me know how it goes. It's
Yeah,
gonna
I'll
be
be trying
so exciting.
all of this stuff. I hope at some point, like it's
Yeah.
definitely stuff I want to get into. I've tried bending spoons, never had any luck. Have you had any luck with
Yeah.
that?
I have only once. I've tried multiple times. Once early on, so
That's
it
cool.
was that was another. I'd say one of the little move to the next level of accepting something's going on. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it was really fascinating and weird, and it was very early in my research. So um, yeah, but yeah, I can't explain why I only was able to do it once. And then another time to back up that made it more evidential is at a spoon bending event with Forever Family in a room full of myself and mediums. And I was the only non-medium. We're all women about the same size. There weren't like any muscly people, and they were able to bend the same spoons I couldn't. So that was pretty evidential for me.
yeah,
And
yeah. No, that's something I
um,
really want to be able to do. I really love to do that, obviously. And I have these really bulky spoons at home that I could bend, with strength, but I would leave a mark. If I bent it with strength, I'd look at my hand and I'd see the imprint, that kind of spoon. So they're the one that I hope to one day bend and look at my hand and see nothing and, be like, yes, but
yeah,
not yet.
I
I'll
bent
tell
a
you.
few with strength one time, and I wanted to see if I could do it, and it felt so different than
Mm,
when it happened naturally, or supernaturally. I don't know. Yeah, it was physiologically a completely different experience. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, since we're getting close to an hour, if you have a little more time, I'd love to ask you a few more questions.
sure. Yeah, sure.
Great. UFOs. I don't have as consistent, organized questions about these because I don't know as much yet. I am fascinated and just
Mm.
at the very start of researching this. But again, Leslie Kean is one of the big researchers, and I trust her. So, first of all, I guess I'll break it down to first of all, do you think there's life on other planets?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, to say about Leslie as well, I can advise you books and stuff if you wanna start like diving down this rabbit hole. And Leslie's book would be one of them: UFOs, pilots, generals, and government officials, or government in one order. That's
Yeah,
the
that's the
go
only
on the
one I've
record.
read about it so
Oh,
far.
okay.
Yeah, but
Well,
and
next will
all of
be
you listening, read it.
Into Plain Sight by Ross Coulthard is also really good. For like a kind of general, somebody just getting into the topic. That's a really good one. So your question was exactly.
Well, I'm starting with the most normal, and we're going to get into more of
Do I
the
think there's life
more
on other
out there.
planets?
Yeah, that's the most basic. Do you think there's life on other planets in either our solar system, other solar systems, like material life in our dimension on other planets? I'm starting with the most basic, and we're going to start
Gonna get harder.
easing into some of the weirder.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, that one I can give a resounding. I would be totally gobsmacked if I found out. Like if we had the technology to just do a quick scan of the entire universe or galaxy, even just galaxy. If we did a scan of the entire galaxy, I would be beyond shocked if it came back that we were the only, even intelligent life. I'd be like, what? Like that would I'd have to reflect on everything again. I'd have to go back and maybe I'd have to read the Bible because I'd be like, if we're this special, like, what does that mean? Like that shouldn't be, because yes, everything about it, like the odds and it just tells me that it should be abundant, right? Like even if it's rare in terms of like 0.1% of planets having life, like it should then be abundant and everywhere, and it should essentially be a Star Wars galaxy. So I don't know the extent of it, but yeah, I'm as close to being 100% without being 100% because I haven't seen it. But I'm as close to being 100% as I can be that, yes, there is life on other planets. In terms of our solar system, actually, when I was Have You Met podcast before we kind of transitioned, before we evolved, I had a conversation with a guy called Pascal Lee, who's like he works for NASA Ames. I think he's like the Mars. I can't remember the wording of the organization now. The Mars something, but he's very involved with like Mars and NASA and stuff like that. And I spoke to him about all of this kind of thing. And so it's not just me that thinks there's other life in this solar system. Even Pascal, who's a major skeptic and says he thinks there's a good chance we're the only intelligent life in our galaxy. And he's quite skeptical. He thinks that there's a very solid chance that there's microbial life on Mars. I said in my conversation with him, like, I reckon I'm going to go out there and say, I think there's fish on Europa's moon, on Europa, and that kind of thing. And he had no disagreements really. He's like, yeah, they're down by the vents, deep in these ice oceans, there could easily be, small fish or whatever. And if you have a small fish, maybe a bigger fish can eat the big, I think there's definitely some kind of life. I'm quite confident there's some kind of life in our solar system. Again, it's going to be probably like insect, fish, or smaller. And then outside, yeah, I would say we're probably not the smartest kids on the block, as it were.
I agree with everything you said. And I also think possibly planets in our solar system, as well as many others, maybe way before we were here, maybe way before dinosaurs were here. There could have easily been other planets that then became habitable. And without getting too depressing, I also look at the way we're destroying our planet. I doubt we're the only species to have done that. So probably there's other planets that just their climate got destroyed, or maybe naturally, their sun went out or whatever,
Yeah, there's so many different various like filters and stuff that would keep them to a short lifespan. Especially, if they make the same mistakes we did, of course, that is,
To the slightly more out there has been so much talk of UFOs that have come here, as well as the possibility. Well, let's just start with the UFOs, then I'll go into the next level a little. What are your thoughts on the UFOs, that the recent UFO, disclosures and the congressional hearings, all of that? What do you think?
I mean, I think there's been massive steps forward in the last year, especially the last 6 months. But the congressional hearing, the most recent one, is, of course, thanks in large part to David Grush, who I'm sure you're familiar with, who's a former member of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, very high up, former ranking member of the American government and intelligence departments or whatever. He used to brief the president. I'm sure you've heard this, and I'm sure lots of people have heard all of this kind of thing. Very high security clearance, really legit guy. Like, I've spoken to enough people now that both publicly reaffirm or publicly affirm their trust in David Grush. I've also spoken to numerous people, privately, that affirm that, I've met this guy. He is who he says he is. He's legit. I know other people that have backed up his story, X, Y, and Z. At the end of the day, I believe David Grush. I think he is who he says he is. I think what he's saying is true. If he's not telling the truth, he could face jail and fines and stuff for saying what he said under oath at the congressional hearings. If before David Grush, if we'd talked about this, I would have felt so out there talking about recovered craft, of a non-human origin. I would have felt like, whoa, that's too much to tell Liz and Liz's listeners about. But the fact that David Grush went and said that stuff under oath.
Can you just say what he said? Because I haven't touched upon this that much in the podcast, so I don't know how much our listeners know about it. But you can also listen on Ben's podcast, because he has some episodes that delve into it. But if you want to give people a brief summary.
Yeah, sure. And if people do want to hear about this particular thing that I'm talking about right now, I actually did an episode with Leslie Kean about David Grush, because she was the one that, one of the people that first brought that out and released the article on the day that he kind of went public, as it were. So that's kind of a really good like introduction, I guess, to David Grush and this kind of stuff, rather than the very latest about it. But anyway, yeah, so the stuff he said, in essence, I guess the highlights, the headlines are and this is information that he's not got firsthand. So he didn't work, say, on one of the programs. He wasn't like, tightening bolts and stuff on a UFO. He was in a position where he was tasked with finding out what the American government knew about this kind of stuff. And he ended up getting in touch with 30 to 40 plus not whistleblowers, 30 to 40 plus government employees and people that have been involved in these programs, both firsthand and stuff like that. And they all essentially told him the same story, which the things that he has said now on oath is that, yes, the US government are in possession of craft of non-human origin is the wording that is most commonly used. Although in terms of hypothesis, if we're going to get there, it doesn't necessarily rule out necessarily a future human hypothesis, which is another like crazy mind-boggling thing to think about. But yeah, essentially the non-human craft that we've recovered. He was asked about non-human biologics, and obviously he kind of goes there with like trying to make it like as least, I don't know, as palatable as possible by saying, yeah, but like when we recover a craft, if we find a craft, normally often there would be a pilot for that craft. And so he's like, yeah, that happens. And they're like, so these pilots, were they human? And he's like, no, not human. So essentially, yeah, he's saying we've recovered craft of non-human origin, some of them in good condition, some of them in working condition, some of them not so much. We have biologics, allegedly non-human biologics. So again, if we want to make that sound as basic as it can be, we have alien bodies is basically what he's alluding to.
That have crashed in the U.S.
Not just the U.S. But
I didn't mean to say the U.S. That
and not necessarily crashed. Actually, like some of them, it would seem yes, but some of them, he and other people have kind of alluded to, like that they're in perfect condition. So, like gift. I don't know. Could it have been a gift? Could it have been something else? But necessarily
not
crashed.
Deceased bodies that are non.
Oh no, I'm talking about the craft right now. But in terms of the bodies, he can't really go into it. And if you do like the rabbit hole stuff, if you do all the reading, you'll find bits of both. You'll find stuff that says that they did retrieve some that were alive, and I don't know where I stand on all that. Like I try not to make too much of a judgment. But once you go, like we were saying about physical mediumship, right? Like that's crazy at the beginning, but once you establish all the other things, it's like, oh, okay, I can kind of get behind that now. It's just the same kind of thing. Like once you've gone far enough into all of this stuff and you see all the stuff that's been verified, like it does kind of make sense that somewhere along the line there's going to be a body. Even though, again, it sounds surreal to say it out loud, and it sounds crazy to say it out loud. But yeah, those were his main claims. He's also claimed that people have died by trying to keep these secrets and protect these secrets. People have been killed trying to keep these secrets is essentially what he said, not have died. People have been killed, murdered by essentially either the government or by certain, sections of the government, probably faceless, nameless, probably people and departments we've never heard of, probably people in departments that most people in government have never heard of. That's the thing with all this. It's so compartmentalized and so, hush hush that somebody could be working directly with a colleague or somebody you have lunch with every day and they might have no idea about this stuff. Or yeah, it's wild stuff, I'm telling you. And the Grush stuff is just taking it to a whole new level. He's now about to be, so this, you said this is going to be released in a few weeks. So as of when this is released, I think about 6 weeks ago, he has gone into a SCIF, which is a security, I don't know actually what it stands for, but it's in essence like it's a cleared meeting with a few people where they're allowed to share classified information in a very secure setting. So you're not allowed to take phones in, the recording devices, everything like this, no technology. Basically, you're just in this room on lockdown and you're allowed to have access to certain things, and then they let you go again. But you then have to keep quiet about this stuff. So that's happening essentially now, or essentially 6 weeks ago with David Grush. So I don't know where it's going to go. It's wild. It's wild stuff.
It's so fascinating. And now, do you think these beings that could be coming to our planet, do you think they're significantly superior to us? I mean, because we've already gone to other planets. I mean, robots, not humans. We've gone to the moon. In a couple hundred years, we might be able to build technology that goes to a planet far enough to find other life. Do you think, are they significantly? I mean, there are thoughts that these are other dimensional, very superior beings watching over us, helping us. And then there are thoughts that they just are not so much more advanced than us, given that people are saying this is true. They're not just so much more advanced than us in terms of this high level looking out for human good. They're just live on other planets and have advanced their technology to the point where they can do interstellar travel.
Yeah.
Or interplanetary travel. What would you guess it is, or what have some of the people you've spoken to think of those two explanations?
I mean, I guess my speculations, right? Because that's kind of, we're in speculation territory a little bit now. So I guess I would say, first of all, one kind of parallel maybe I would draw is in terms of us humans, like we would think we're way cleverer than, like cavemen, or we probably are. But if you go back 1,000 years, we'd be like, oh yeah, we're way cleverer than people 1,000 years ago. But I don't know, like if you put me one-on-one in a room with somebody 1,000 years ago, I don't know how much more intellectual or intelligent I am than them necessarily. Of course, as a civilization, we're in a different level now. We're in another hemisphere totally. We wipe the floor with them. But in terms of individual intelligence, I don't know. So in terms of that comparison, like individually, I don't know. As a civilization, whatever they are, whether they're interplanetary or interdimensional, or I really don't know. Like I can have gut feelings that kind of change here and there, but whatever they are, I would say, yeah, as a civilization, they're pretty far ahead of us, quite significantly, way ahead of us, I would say. But again, it's speculating. Like there's only so much I can, yeah. There's so many unknowns in this thing. It's just, there is definitely a phenomenon here. There's definitely something going on that we don't really understand. Whether the US government understand it, they claim they don't. They seem to. There's two outcomes there: either they do or they don't. And if either way, they're lying and covering stuff up. It's just, do they know more than they're letting on? I think probably, but do they know everything? I think probably not. Yeah, there's so many unknowns. I think it's fascinating. I could talk for ages about it. I don't. Tell me other specific things you'd like to know, or if there's anything else, because I'm just going to ramble otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't spent the past 7 years studying this, so I don't have as in-depth, concise questions as I do about afterlife evidence. I'm more like, what? I'm more at the very early stage of what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
So I guess two more questions about it. One is, do you have any thoughts on people who claim abductions?
Yeah, good question. This is something that I still struggle with. Like it was originally, I really struggled with it. Like when I first kind of, came across that, I was like, that's one of the main focuses of not John Mack's book, Ralph Blumenthal's book that I mentioned earlier, the biography of Dr. John Mack. Obviously that goes into that in detail. He took it seriously. He was a psychiatrist, as I said, a Harvard psychiatrist, and he went on record and said, I've done, psychological evaluations of these people who claim abduction experiences. They're psychologically normal. They're healthy. They're a cross section of society. You have normal people working normal jobs that are psychologically healthy, and yet they report these experiences. So he, being an open-minded, true scientist, was like, wow, what the hell is going on here? Like, he called them experiencers rather than abductees, because, he wanted to keep it like open and didn't want to kind of put a strict label on it. But what do I think of it? Yeah, I mean, I think it's something certainly that needs to be taken seriously. Like initially, I think that's what I would say. Like I wouldn't want to ridicule anybody that claims to have had an experience like this. Then beyond, it needs to be taken seriously. Is it something that's physically happening, or is it something that's, related to consciousness? Is it something else? If it's like a mental health thing, and I'm not saying I think it is, but if it was, that would still be an enormous thing. It would mean we have this essentially a pandemic of people believing they've been abducted by aliens. And that would seem like a major and bizarre national, international health concern. I don't think it is that, but I'm just saying whatever the outcome is, whatever is the explanatory framework behind it, it's something's happening, and it needs to be figured out. I guess the more I've heard with Grush, the more people I've spoken to, the more I've looked into it. I think probably or possibly some people are being abducted. It feels, again, like hard to say this stuff for me because I've been quite skeptical about it a lot of my life about this kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't think all of these people making these claims are crazy. There's one particularly interesting case for me, more than one, but there's one called the Pascagoula incident. And it's these two guys in America. They were like out fishing for the day. I think they're quite country, like real simple guys, and hopefully they're not listening and getting offended by me saying that, but nice guys. They seem like, yeah, good guys. Well done, guys. Anyway, they're fishing, and essentially they get abducted, seemingly. They go to the police station afterwards and report their experience. And so we just got taken, blah, 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 this. And the police leave them. They question them. They leave them in this room, this like interrogation room or whatever, while they go and talk about it somewhere else. And they go and actually listen because they left the recording device in there. This was before recording stuff was like every day. So these people didn't know, they had no clue they were being recorded. So you expect, if they're hoaxing, if they're making it up, you're going to hear like, oh, I think they're buying it, mate. Yeah, I think they're buying it. Yeah, it's going well. Yeah, just keep up with that tact. If you can let a few more tears flow, that'll be good. They on the recording when the police officers were out of the room, they're like, one of them is saying to them, like, dude, are you okay? Like, man, we're gonna get you home soon. I'm gonna get you the medication. Like, it's gonna help you. Like, calm down. Like I can't believe like this is all happening. Like, what an insane like experience. Like, I'm getting like chills through my body just thinking about it, because of the way they're so convincing to each other. It's like two guys that have just been through an incredibly traumatic experience, and that's what comes through. So I don't know, really, really interesting phenomenon, really kind of creepy side aspect of this whole thing. But at the same time, very not creepy in the sense that like it actually is kind of thing we would do, right? Like if we found a planet and it was primitive life there, let's say less primitive than us, let's say it's kind of like Earth, but without the humans, you can bet your ass we'd be picking up every different species on that planet and sticking stuff in them and checking their temperature and, pointing lasers at their stuff, doing various things to them that they would have no idea what we're doing. That's essentially...
We already do that here when we discover new species. And the horrible experimentations we do on animals we know. I mean,
exactly. And on other humans. So it's, as much as it's a bit creepy to think that they're taking people without their permission and stuff, like that's not necessarily how not everything is so black and white. Like it's not like we go up to animals and ask them to sign a permission slip. Why should they, if there is some non-human presence here, why should they feel like they have to come and do that to us? Oh, because we're more conscious, we're cleverer than animals. Are we? Do we know that? Are we,
We don't know that. And animals have such like depth of emotion, whether they can discuss philosophy. I
doesn't matter.
Haven't seen evidence to think that, but they have such love and emotions,
and they feel pain and everything like that. And So again, abductions, it seems like if you break it down to the simplest thing, it would seem that that's what's happening for me. Like keep it, like trying to find out what's going, because again, I've spoken to people. I spoke to this guy, Isaac Arthur, who's a well-known YouTuber, science and futurism, very skeptical guy, open-minded to an extent, does some really interesting stuff, but pretty like skeptical about UFOs and that kind of thing. And I asked him a question about like, how would he approach a planet like ours if he, came across it, if he was in charge of dealing with it. And he said things like, we'd watch them for a long time. We'd try and, like send craft down there, try and blend in, try and make drones that look like they're animals, X, Y, and Z, try and learn their language. We'd probably, and again, you probably would abduct some that are going to not draw attention because you want to learn about their DNA and X, Y, and Z, and you want to learn how they work and everything like that. So, yeah.
And then they return the abducted people, at least as far as we know. I mean, obviously the ones that come back to tell about it.
Yeah, that's a scary kind of potential can of worms on the side of that. It's like, is there a massive number of people that never come back? Like, Again,
That's
I don't know,
terrifying.
but it's a scary thought. Unless maybe they're living the high life on another planet. So
That's what I was wondering. Maybe haven't been so
yeah,
happy
I
here,
try
and
to
they
not
go
make
and
assumptions.
fall in
Yeah,
love. Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah,
true. And they're like, "Please keep me." Maybe they've fallen in
yeah,
love, made a family. I mean,
yeah.
who knows?
Just to hark back to the reincarnation, actually, it just made me think of that because I see a lot of people online saying like reincarnation is terrifying. I can't think of anything worse. It's like hell, everything like that. And I'm like, you're saying that based on a whole load of assumptions. You're saying that based on probably not enjoying this current life that you're living. You're saying that based on thinking it's all out of your control or based on the fact that it's going to be, monotonous every time. There's just so many unknowns. Like, how do we know? Like, maybe when we die in this life, our higher self, our ultimate consciousness is able to make a decision about like what is the best for us. Maybe it is a tough life on earth. And I hate, in a way, I don't like the idea that some people would choose to have a tough life, but because it kind of feels like not very, nice to the person that's having a tough life. But at the same time, how do we know? How do we know that, you wouldn't finish your life and be like, that was too easy. I need to do something that's going to build my soul in this other department or whatever, build my character, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. Anyway, that was a quick
No,
distraction there
I
to just reminded me.
I agree. And I mean, to me, the horrible thought would be being wiped out and never getting to experience
Oh
again. I mean,
yeah,
I guess you
yeah,
wouldn't mind, but because you wouldn't know, but to me, that seems like the worst. And I
yeah,
would think if, I think reincarnation is the most likely explanation because I believe people like Dr. Tucker, Dr. Stevenson, Jim Matlock, I mean, their research is so solid. But I would think if you have some terrible lives, you have some wonderful lives and some lives that are complex. I mean, some
mm,
lives are just as bad as you can get, and some are just
yeah,
almost a dream life. And that you probably end up having a balance of a combination. And most of us who have something in the middle with some hardships and some joys. And
yeah. And maybe
I
it's,
would
yeah,
guess,
like I say, kind of fits what you need in that moment, in that period of
yeah.
time.
And I would guess we probably live material lives on other planets as well. I mean,
I find that
just
a really
not,
fascinating thought. Like, yeah,
yeah,
about that. How
yeah.
does that work? With the reincarnation and stuff. Yeah, like are there people that used to live on other planets coming here being reincarnated as humans? Or do we get reincarnated in other places? Is it, like we said earlier, if it's tied to the planet, it would make sense that it's just our planet that gets recycled, reincarnated. And but then if this is just one reality, like for all of the universes, or for everything, whatever is out there, then yeah, the possibilities are endless. But then I don't know, like that way, then I feel like, then there's maybe too many people that remember a previous life on Earth for that to be realistic. So yeah, but it doesn't rule it out. It just, yeah, I love
But
speculating about this stuff. So it's so
you
crazy
could
to think
have
about.
multiple lives on Earth. And I mean, if you think of infinity and you think of multiple galaxies and solar systems, I mean, just because you had multiple lives on Earth doesn't mean you haven't or
Hmm.
won't in the future
Yeah,
have multiple lives. And then when you get into time, probably before, life evolved on this Earth, or I wouldn't be shocked if there was before the dinosaurs, other civilizations on this planet that got wiped out. I mean, when
yeah,
you start thinking about massive time, beyond time biologists can study, I wouldn't, why couldn't there have been other species that evolved like millions of years ago here?
yeah, yeah,
Why
yeah.
rule that out? And if we could, yeah.
And to go even one
And
more mind-boggling step forward from there, it's like, who knows? We could have multiple lives at once. On some level, I could be experiencing another life right now. I mean, again, I'm not saying I think that's likely. I'm just saying we don't know. I can't rule that out. Right? That's still within the realms of possibility, especially when we learn that time doesn't work how we think it works, and people can access stuff that hasn't happened yet, and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know.
say that. And I don't know. I don't think that's the most out there thing the further I go with this. Like, if our core consciousness is encased in some quantum mechanism we can't understand, that's non physical, and a part of it quantum entangles with my brain and this physical body as Liz, and your brain and physical body as Ben.
Hmm.
And if parts of it could be quantum entangling with other physical bodies, I have a really hard time of adding to that in the future, in the past, but it could be quantum entangling with other bodies here and getting the experience other bodies on possibly other planets. And when you die, that experience absorbs back into your non-physical conscious being, and you've because if the non-physical conscious being is growing and learning and evolving, this could be a piece of it, this life, just like another day is for us in this life. I mean, that's how I could perceive it. So I don't think, I mean, it's not the most quote unquote normal thing, but I don't think it's as out there the further I go with this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, after going in quite deep, because again, I'm sure when we both started getting into this, that would have seemed insane.
Oh, beyond. Yeah. I mean, everything I've said this podcast before, I would have thought all of this except life on other planets in this material. I mean, I always thought the vastness of the solar system and galaxies that it seemed as unrealistic as maybe 500 years ago to say this town or country, before planes and easy travel, to say this is the only place on the whole planet that has life. It seems but yeah, beside that, everything else I would have been like, oh my God, this is crazy. No way.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, let's go back to just afterlife and evidence, and we'll close on a few questions about that. Is there a guest or a few guests, or I guess that's a two-part question. You can answer both. You can answer one of this if you don't want to sort of favor one guest over another. But is there a guest and or a bit of evidence that you are just like, oh my God, this is the most mind-blowing, amazing thing I've ever heard?
Yeah, I guess there's a few. Guests, you're right. It's hard because I've spoken to so many amazing people. I guess some of the most meaningful to me have been Leslie, first of all, just because of surviving death being the first thing to, like, literally, if it wasn't for Leslie, I might still be, working a 9 to 6 and still thinking that the most important thing in the world is money or whatever. And, I might never have kind of had that change of perspective, that new paradigm come into my life. So Leslie was hugely important for me. Dean, for similar reasons. After that, there's so many, like Jim Tucker was somebody that I like you have read his books, and that was really profound for me. But yeah, I could kind of make a case for each one of my guests almost. So in terms of the evidence that really blew my mind, right? I guess there's like two sides to that. So first, there's like the kind of side of things that's blew my mind in the sense that, like, in the bad way, like too mind-boggling, like really pushes my limit, not necessarily in a bad way, but just so hard for me to grasp. And I'm not saying they're not real, like spoon bending's kind of in this area, physical mediumship's in this area. Levitation is like the wildest thing I've come across. That's like, just like, again, I don't disbelieve it. I don't necessarily believe it with 100% conviction, but I probably do. With everything I've learned, I err more on the side that it could be real. So that's a wild phenomenon that, again, is like, what the hell is that? In terms of the really mind-blowing evidence in the good way, though, there's probably two that I'll pick out. Jim Tucker's work on the Ryan Hammond's case. So I know everybody picks that. It's one of the most well-known reincarnation cases, but 55 verified memories that he had, that they had written down. Sorry.
Tell the case, because I think us researchers know it well, but not everyone listening. Some people come on and are very new to this. So tell what the Ryan Hammond's case is.
Let me see if I can summarize it a little bit, and feel free to jump in if I miss anything or if I'm like not telling it right, because I haven't done a big recap on his case. But so yeah, Ryan, I can't remember the exact age when he started having these memories, but was it first that they were watching the film and he pointed out, maybe that's kind of one of the first ways it came out. He's just this young child that, he saw, that's me basically in a film. That's me. And his parents are like, what?
The plane that lands on the island?
That's James Leininger.
No, James Leininger's the plane crash. There was a boy in Ireland.
In Ireland. I thought you said like on an island. I was thinking Iwo Jima.
In Ireland, and a plane lands on their island. Like it's like a lodge, not crashes. Like there was a runway on the beach, and
that's a different one.
Then which one's the Ryan? Okay,
Ryan is like the Hollywood. He was Mr.
That's
Hollywood.
Marty Martinson.
Yeah, Ryan Hammond's is his current who he is. Ryan.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I always called him Marty Martin.
Okay,
Okay.
I got you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we're
yeah.
on the same. Okay. We're on, then yes, yeah. Okay. Now we're on the same page.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Okay.
so Marty Martin. I was gonna get to Marty Martin, but yeah.
Ryan
Spoiler
Hammonson.
alert.
Okay. Okay. Spoiler alert. But okay. I just wanted, okay. So now I know which case.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Right. So Ryan Hammonds is was a child. He's now, I guess, an adult. But anyway, yeah, it was just one of the most compelling cases because of how many individual statements he made about the previous personality, and he made these statements before they even got close to identifying a previous personality. His mother, I think Andrea, was in touch with Jim Tucker and emailing this stuff to Jim again before they verified a personality, significantly before they verified a personality. I think even at one point they thought they had a personality, and they kind of got a film crew together and went out to the location, and Ryan was like, "Nah, that's not it. Like this is not familiar." And so that for me gave a lot of credibility, because I was like, wow, if they were faking it, surely they would have just jumped on this, because what are the odds they're gonna, if the mum or the dad is pulling the strings, what are the odds they're really gonna be like, come on, play like it's not the real place. They're gonna find, we're gonna find some. And it just seems, so again, that whole part of the kind of the we think we found them, no we haven't. But 55 facts, everything from I had a daughter, I had a green car, but then I didn't let anybody drive the green car. I had a big house, I had a swimming pool. I worked at an agency. I was just looking at them before. Some of them are so interesting. Let me see if I've still got them on my phone real quick, because I had the
Yeah.
photos.
Yeah. And just so everyone know, he turned out to find out he was a big Hollywood agent. He was matched with a big Hollywood agent who also had small extra parts
Yeah.
in a movie, and he saw an old photo. Again, this is an extra in the movie. It was a successful agent, not like a famous person. And the child pointed to these old photos in old Hollywood book, was like, that's me, that's me.
Yeah.
But yeah, say some of the points that you noted.
Yeah, so I've got these. I just kind of took screenshots from Surviving Death back when I read it. So the first one, as we say, so he was the man in the photograph from the movie Night After Night. So that was him like pointing at the photo. And then from there, so he lived in Hollywood. So yeah, kind of semi-generic, some of them, he lived somewhere with the word rock or mount in it, like in the street name. So that's pretty niche. He was very rich. Okay, his house was big. Yeah, there was a brick wall at the house. Some of these are generic, but then yeah, there were 3 boys. He didn't think the boys were his, but he gave them his name anyway. He had a daughter. He brought coloring books home. He had trouble with his older stepdaughter. She wouldn't listen. She didn't respect him. His mother had curly brown hair. He had a large swimming pool. He had a younger sister. He brought his daughter a dog when she was about 6. And then I love this, but she didn't really like the dog. He hated cats. He knew a specific senator. He used to see this senator in a certain place, which he found on a map. He had a green car. And again, like a nice touch, he didn't let anybody drive the green car. He had too many. I was going to say too many. He had many wives. His wife drove a nice black car. He was an agent, as you said. The agency changed people's names, stage names. And these keep going. I'm only at like number 23, so that's less than half. Are there any like some really interesting ones here? So he knew, some specific people. Bread was his favorite food. That doesn't seem like a very common favorite food.
And not what a child would say, because Ryan Hammond was under 5 years old. I think he was like 3 when he started saying these.
Yeah, stuff like that. He also said, I'm not 5, I'm closer to 105 from when I was here before. And he would have been 106 when he said that. So that's like pretty quick maths for a kid to do. He died at age 61. And I think when they originally started going through those records, they were like, well, he didn't get that one right because he died at like 59 or something. And then I think Jim went another step further and found a different records from other places, and it was like, oh no, he did actually die at 61. The other record was incorrect. But it's the whole combination of these things, like 55, all of those things he said before they verified this person. And all of them, they spoke to the daughter of Marty Martin, and all of them are verified. And like, it's just a wild case. Like, I'd love to talk to anybody that thinks that case, along with all the other cases, but that case particularly is like easily dismissible. Like, how do you even go about throwing that out there? I don't know.
Didn't he meet his daughter and he was kind of shaken up because he's like, she's
Mm-hmm.
old now, because he died when she was still very young. And that was
Yeah.
disturbing for him because I guess she was elderly, and a parent doesn't often see their children
Yeah.
elderly, you know?
They
So,
actually showed in Surviving Death like a scene of him meeting the daughter of Marty Martin, and I think they met when he was younger as well or something like that, and it was a bit better. But this time it was kind of awkward, and they're like, oh, do you remember this or something? And he's like, no, not really, no. And
yeah.
me, when I watched it for the first time, I was like, oh, this is not a good look. I was really convinced, I was becoming very convinced, and now this, like, I don't know. But of course, now when I look at it, like, that's totally normal. Like, his memories of that, he's losing them by the time he's 6 years old or 6 or 7 or whatever. Normally, you're changing a lot at that age. Yeah.
That's when they say most of the children start to forget.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, he was very young. It was clear. And then, yeah, he started getting to the age and he stopped remembering.
Yeah,
And yeah,
exactly.
for some reason, they say the memories stop around age 6.
Yeah.
The kids who have, I mean, there's exceptions like the James Leininger, but that's partially, I think, because it just kept being talked about. So he, who knows if it shifted
There's
to a
always
different part of
exceptions.
his
That's why
brain.
we can never
Yeah.
get anywhere here, because there's always stuff that like throws a spanner in the works. But yeah, I mean, that for me is one of them. I've got another thing that really I found compelling, if you want me to kind of talk about that quickly as well. It's about like the mediumship side of stuff. So this was in a physical mediumship seance. I think 120 years ago ish, something like that, about 1905, or again around there, maybe a bit before, 1890 something. In Iceland, a medium called Indridi Indridsson. I'm sure you've heard of this guy. So they were doing a seance. I can't remember all the people who was there, but it was like some high end, some very credible people, like mayors and scientists and whatnot, probably. And anyway, it was a drop-in communicator, that the thing that I find so compelling. So you probably know what that is, but for anybody that doesn't, it's essentially somebody communicating through the medium who has no links or ties to the medium or to anybody sitting in the room. So it's just like a random person, a random personality, like literally dropping in and being like, hey, what's up? So in this particular seance, this person drops in and he's saying in Danish and they're in Iceland. And I don't think the medium speaks Danish and things like that. It's a whole other story. It's a long story, but just to kind of keep it summary. So he says, I'm Mr. Jensen. I'm a manufacturer by trade, things like this. And then he disappears. An hour later, he comes back and he says, oh, I was just in Copenhagen, where there's a massive fire at one of the factories on this big street. And so they all make a note of this, the people at the seance, because they're not just doing that seance for fun as well. Like they're like trying to investigate this stuff and find out like if it's real, like we are. So they write down all the notes and like, the times and what was said and everything like that. And of course, being like 120 years ago, there's no Twitter, there's no Reddit, there's no text. So they had to wait about a month to find out like if this fire was real. So a month goes by, the newspaper arrives on a boat, and they're obviously like probably super excited, like quick fight, like was there a fire? They're like, flick. Yeah, okay, there was a fire on this road, like store corner. I can't remember the name of the road. It's a massive street basically in Copenhagen in Denmark, full of factories and industry and stuff like that. And so, yeah, the fire was when he said it was, almost to the minute. Like the timings that he had said all added up with how long a fire would take to get started compared to when the actual fire brigade were informed of the fire, when they said the fire was put out, everything like that. So anyway, a guy called Erlander Haraldsson was an Icelandic researcher and psychologist and everything in these areas, really interested in mediumship. He, much more recently now, he got access to, I think through somebody's will or something like that, notes and stuff that were made, again, in seances with Indridi Indridsson. And he went through these and found that Emil Jensen was a character, a personality that came back frequently. And so he was able to ascertain, he's able to get more information about this guy. So he's like, he found somewhere where they were asking him questions. So Emil confirmed what his job was, if he had, children, what his situation was with his brothers and sisters, and a few other bits and bobs like that. Not 55 like Ryan Hammond's, unfortunately, but still enough to be quite interesting. So anyway, Erlander's like, wow, there's this information now, and I don't think anybody's double checked this, so I'm going to take it to like the wherever he went, and the National Library or the National Archives, and he finds out there was an Emil Jensen that had all of these things ticked off. Like, okay, yeah, so brothers and sisters were still alive when he died, and at the time of that seance, yes. Didn't have any kids, yes. I think he was 50 when he died, and I think he'd claimed he didn't die young or something like that. So that one's kind of, that's not very compelling, that one specifically. But over the course of these things, it's like, yeah, correct. And then interestingly, he'd lived his whole life, I think pretty much his whole life, on this exact street where the fire had taken place, like 300 meters away from where this fire had been. So then all of a sudden it kind of makes sense. It's like, oh, so he went and said he watched this fire during that thing. Why would he have gone to watch a fire unless he had a serious personal interest in this area, in this street, in this building? And yeah, it just kind of, everything just came together in that case that I was like, wow, like the being drop in. So not knowing anybody in the circle, the fact of this fire that was then confirmed a month later, the fact that then more information was found in records, again, like decades later by a researcher who then was able to verify all of it. And then we had the little cherry on the cake of like, oh, Annie lived like a stone's throw, literally, from the house, the factory that was caught on fire. So again, it's just one of hundreds of amazing cases, but it was one that stood out to me when I read Leslie's book, Surviving Death.
I love that case too. Yeah. And it shows the medium wasn't reading the people psychically. So that's another evidence in favor of survival.
Drop-in communicators. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, I didn't think to mention that earlier, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So we have been going for a while. This has been such a good conversation. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like me to? Anything you want to add that we didn't touch upon?
I mean, off the top of my head, not really. No, I guess just on the UFO stuff, like if people are interested or if you're interested, and I can point you in the right direction. But yeah, Leslie Kean's book, UFOs in Plain Sight by Ross Coulthard. Have cases to have a look at. Have a look at the Nimitz case. Explain that one. Like, I'd love to hear anybody explain that one. That's like that one. We have multiple pilots that have seen something. We have multiple sensors. We have radar. Essentially everything. That's like the most well recorded, most well documented UFO incident ever. And then you've got these incredible school cases like Ariel School and Westall School, where tens and tens, or in the case of Westall, hundreds of pupils saw this stuff happening, and they the teachers saw it, locals in the town saw it. There's just so much. There's James Fox's documentary, The Phenomenon. I can't recommend that enough. That's on YouTube. You should definitely watch that, Liz, if you haven't seen that. The Phenomenon, James Fox. And yeah, on YouTube for free. You can find that now. He did another documentary much more recently called Moment of Contact, which is about an incident that took place in Varginha in Brazil, where there was an alleged UFO crash and allegedly some beings walking around the town, which is a wild case and a fascinating documentary, which I can't recommend enough. But yeah, The Phenomenon is the perfect introduction for anybody that wants to learn, like, just, get into this topic in about 2 hours. It's very accessible in terms of just easy to watch.
The James Fox one. Yeah.
They're both James Fox. He's probably the most prolific UFO documentarian filmmaker.
Wonder. Well, thank you so much for such a good conversation. And everyone listening, Ben's podcast is one of my favorites. So it's really just he interviews so many of the people that just absolutely transformed my mind about afterlife, and now starting to learn about UFOs. So I highly recommend it. So tell all our listeners where they can find you and follow you, and I'll of course include this in the show notes.
Well, yeah, firstly, thank you as well so much for inviting me on here. As I said to you, I really, really appreciate you doing that and giving me this platform to talk to people. I'm honored. Where can people find me? Yeah, so we're on Anchor. That's what it used to be called, isn't it? That was like my distributor. So we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on, a bunch of others. I don't know every single one, but the main one's Spotify, Apple, and let's say most podcast apps. Also on YouTube as videos. So we put full length video interviews up there, and able to put much more links and things into those. And we kind of try and put stuff on screen and things like that during the interviews. So this is probably where you're going to get the most information. But yeah, YouTube and Spotify and Apple. On YouTube, it's youtube.com/unraveling the universe with 2 L's, the British spelling, I think it is. And Spotify, yeah, I'll send you the link because it's one of those links that, it's just loads of numbers and letters.
And I'll link to all these in the show notes, and just search any of your podcast apps. Yeah, Unraveling with 2 L's, the universe. I found it easily on all of them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. All the best. Take care. Wish you the best of luck with this and with your book.
Hi. So exciting news. Book number 2, WTF Just Happened. A sciencey skeptic investigates even more evidence of an afterlife and fights for justice with her dead dog, is ready. You can get it everywhere in both ebook and paper. This book essentially picks up where WTF Part 1 left off. I continue to experience a bunch of what the fuckery, and it's a bit different now because I know the mediums pretty well, so I get some actual opinions on what they thought of me when they first met me. I get more crazy signs, and the evidence just keeps accumulating. I keep bugging my dad for that one sign I really, really wanted, and some really crazy stuff happens related to that. I conduct experiments with psychic medium Joe Peretta, and again, bunch of what the fuckery. And in a really weird twist, I get called as a secondary witness to testify in the Harvey Weinstein case, which is a secondary plot. And that results in my dog, Peanut, who is on the other side, and sending me some signs, ends up becoming famous. So if you want to keep hearing about scientific evidence of an afterlife and this really bizarre side story, you can go order my second book in the series. I love getting to say that now. WTF Just Happens, actually a series. So you can go to my website, and that links to everywhere this book's available. It's available in ebook and print, not yet audiobook. That's not going to be nearly as long as it was for book 1, but it's going to be a few more months. So you can go to my website and order WTF Just Happened. A sciencey skeptic investigates even more evidence of an afterlife and fights for justice with her dead dog. To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened. A sciencey skeptic explores grief, healing, and evidence of an afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_, or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?